Any questions, concerns about the course structure? I got a couple of emails in the past couple of days, so I just wanted to kind of put a blanket question out to everyone and make sure that we're all okay with how the course is going to work. Are there any questions or concerns? Hey, Katie, I'm glad you got in. So just to the main question I got was what's due for class today. This is probably quite different than the way your RL skills classes have been in the past, in that a lot of times we would ask people to prepare things for pretty much every class with the assumption that you might be asked to perform for a grade. We're just not going to do that this semester. It's not a great use of time, kind of the way things are, because of the inability for us to sing all together with our speakers on and everything. So from class to class, you don't ever have anything like due to the point where, oh, I might have to do this for a grade in class. It's more just you have the 4 items for the unit that are on Google Classroom, 3 of them. I have to make the quiz still. And those are due by that September 20th deadline. But other than that, our class time will be spent just mostly drilling things like harmonic dictation and sight reading and stuff that's harder to practice by yourself, especially if you guys don't have access to a keyboard. So that will be what we spend our time with in class. And like I said, we'll go a half an hour for each class meeting. That extra 20 minutes, if you want to practice the rep that you're singing for a grade, please stay after, and I'm happy to kind of coach you through and practice with you. But there will never be anything like due per se for each class. So you don't have to come in worried about like performing for a grade today. It's just kind of skill acquisition and practice time, and a good time for you to get comfortable with things and make mistakes and kind of learn and build your skills up. So hopefully that clarifies that for everyone. Okay, so we are going to start a new harmonic topic today. And I'm going to share my screen with you with some staff paper on it. I will post this to Google Classroom as well. So you don't have to worry about missing out on anything. If you like to write things down as we go, feel free. But you don't have to worry about missing out on anything, because I will just save this as a PDF and post it up to Google Classroom this afternoon. So our topic for today is what I'm going to call mediant modulations. And what that means is moving somewhere that is a third away. It could be a third up or a third down. We are going to focus on a third up today. If you remember from the sight reading that we did in class on Tuesday, we started in G major, we moved to B minor, which is a kind of new and unusual scheme for us in terms of what we have done thus far in our RL skills classes. So we're going to focus on 3 different modulation schemes for today. The first one is familiar to you. It's a minor mode 1 that goes to major 3, and that's just a fancy way of saying that you're going to the relative major. So that's old news. You learned that in Skills 2. Our next one is going to be what we did in the Coleridge-Taylor sight reading example the other day. 1 going to its diatonic 3. So what I want you to do right now is pick any major key that's easy for you, and I want you to find its 3rd scale degree and think about that key. And then think about how far apart they are on the circle of fifths. So what I mean by that is just by default, I'm going to choose C major. And if we go to its 3, its 3rd scale degree is E, so we would go to E minor. Now, if you think about C major, you've got 0 sharps and flats. You think about E minor, you have just 1 sharp. So in terms of the circle of fifths, you're really close, right? So what that means is this particular modulation scheme has tons of pivot chords. So they share a lot of harmonies which means that this modulation can be done really smoothly. Coleridge-Taylor does it through the 6, so he sort of almost tonicizes the 6 before going to the 3. But because these two key areas are really closely related, it's an easy modulation to make. It doesn't sound spectacularly like jarring, and sometimes you don't realize it's happened until you get to the cadence. Now we are going to contrast that with what happens if we are in a major key and we go to the major 3. So let's do the same thing. I'm going to arbitrarily choose a major key with C major. And if we go to the major 3, we would go to E major. So notice we're not going to the flat 3. We played around with that a little bit in Skills 2. Just the regular diatonic scale degree 3, but we're changing the quality to major. So again, 0 sharps and flats. E major, though, 4 sharps. So put yourself on the circle of fifths. We are really far away. If you guys are familiar with the Waldstein Sonata, it does this. So you have a first theme area that's in C and a secondary theme that's in E. So really far away on the circle of fifths. Now I want you to build yourself a C major scale and plot triads on all of them. And then do the same with E major in your head, or 2 key areas, 2 mediant key areas that work for you. And you're going to find, if you compare them, they share literally 0 keys, 0 triads. So there are no diatonic triads that are shared between these 2 keys. So what that means is that in order to pivot from one to the other, you have to either use mixture or some sort of chromatic chord. That means it's going to sound very kind of far away. So just for example, let's say we're in C and we want to get to E major via its 5 chord. So we're in C major. Our goal is to get to E major. And a lot of times the easiest way to pivot is just slap a 5 of 5 in there, or slap a 5 of goal X in there and move our way. So if we want to go that way, so say we want to do a 5-7 of 3, who would be the root of that? What letter name would be the root of a 5-7 in E major? B. Yeah, B. So think about that. We're trying to build a B7. That means we're building a dominant off of the scale degree 7, off of the leading tone of our original key. That is a wildly distant movement. I have been kind of tooling around with the sound quality on this. It still is kind of trashy, and I've got one last thing before I just kind of throw it all out. But so if the decay is really bad, my apologies. But here we are in C. So we can do just a hokey kind of 1, 2, 6, 5, 7, 1. Now I'm going to do this with 0 grace. I'm just going to move from this tonic to a 5-7 of 3 so you can hear how it sounds. So here's your tonic, and here's your 5-7 of 3. Do you hear how distant that is? How like wildly other that sounds to go from 1 to 3, especially via its dominant like that. It sounds incredibly kind of foreign. So because that sound is so distinct, we are going to add one more progression in today to play with, and it's one that you already know, and that is just, we are also going to do major 1 going to 5, which is like the first modulation scheme you learned. But it's because in contrast to the 1 to 3, it's going to give you a good barometer for, oh, going 1 to 5, that sounds very closely related, very comfortable. Going 1 to 3, that sounds like we've gone to another harmonic realm entirely. So what we're going to do, first off, are there any questions? You guys, please just feel free to like take yourself off mute and shout something out if you have questions. All right, cool. I taught yoga when I was in grad school, and I used to always tell people, because people are generally pretty shy in those situations, like, if you have a question or you're not sure if you're doing something right, like, let me know, or just fall over and make a lot of noise, and I'll come over. So this is the equivalent to that. Take yourself off mute and, like, shout something if you need extra, if you need an explanation. Okay, so our focus today. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to send you off into breakout rooms and have you do some work with some progressions that are pre-recorded from Sibelius, because I had, you know, a saw in the background last night while I was recording these, and it also just sounded bad on the piano. So I'm going to send you into breakout groups, and you're going to have some progressions to listen to. What I want you to focus on for today, and we'll make this more complicated as we go, but today I want your focus to be quality. And what I mean by that is I want you to focus on the quality in which you start. Do you start in a major or minor key? And the quality in which you end. Do you start in a major or do you end in a major or minor key? Because that's going to pretty much narrow down your options entirely. So if we're going 1 to 3, that means that you're going minor to major. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're listening and you say, I have no idea where we went, but we started in a major key and we ended in a minor key, that is your big 1 to little 3. Now, if we stay major the entire time, you have 2 options, and this is why I added in the dominant option. Because 1 to 3 and 1 to 5 are both major to major. So once you decide or deduce that you started and ended in major, then you have to focus in on, was it a major ending that sounded connected to tonic? Did it sound closely related? Or did we do that really weird sort of off and left field modulation to bring us somewhere very, very foreign? In which case, that's likely your 1 to 3. So I put a couple of things in the chat. Yeah, Alana, what's up?
Would we ever have a minor to minor type thing?
It's possible. So the most common would be to go from minor 1 to just diatonic minor 3. It's not nearly as common as the other ones. So doing that and going major 1 to flat 3 will add in probably a week, just as other things. But the minor 1 to minor 3 is much less common. Any other questions? All right, so if you look in the chat, I put 2 links in there. One is to a folder on Google Drive, and that folder has 5 progressions. They're numbered for you. They do one of these 4 things. The 5th progression is the funkiest, so if you don't get to it, don't worry about it. The first 4 are a little less weird. And then the other thing that's linked in there is a Google Doc. So I'm going to just keep this Google Doc alive and running for the semester, and it basically just has the instructions I would like you to follow while you're in your breakout room, so that I don't tell them to you and then you go to your breakout room and no one remembers. So you have them in front of you of what to do. There's a prioritized list. So your first priority is qualities. Your second priority is figuring out the key areas. If you're feeling really spicy, then you can do things like try and dictate the bass line, or even try and figure out who the pivot chord is or who the Roman numerals are. But main priority is figure out the modulation scheme. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. Maybe designate like one person as the kind of DJ. And yes, I will send them again, sorry. Maybe designate one person as like the person with the sound files, and I will show you how to share your audio so that you all can listen at the same time. So this link I'm sending right now is to the sound files. And this one is to the Google Doc. And they are open to everyone, so you shouldn't have any problem accessing them. But if you do, flag me down. So I'm going to share my screen with you real quick, my desktop screen, and walk you through sharing your sound. I hope I don't have anything weird on my desktop. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay, cool. So to share your audio and your audio only, you're going to click on this little screen share green thing. Yours will just say screen share instead of new share. And then you click on advanced, and then music or computer sound, and then share. So that will share just your sound and not your sound along with your screen. That way one person can play the sound files and you'll all be able to hear it without weird feedback and stuff. We all good? Any questions? All right, cool. I'm going to put you in some breakout rooms. It is going to be randomly selected, and then you guys will be free to, I would say like 10 minutes maybe, and then I will float around and see what you're up to and how things are going. I'm going to put you in groups of 3. All right, so if you want to get yourself set up with everything, you can start doing that, and then I will get you guys into your rooms. All right. I'll float around and then we'll come back as a group in a couple minutes. All right, I think everybody's back. So I would like to just talk about modulation scheme. We're going to revisit these on Tuesday for a little bit of bass dictation and figuring out maybe where the pivot chord is, especially the last one is really funky, and I think it's the second one is pretty neat too. So we'll play around with those on Tuesday. But let's talk modulation scheme. So this is a free and open question. Anyone can blurt it out. The first example, so progression number 1. Where did we start? Major or minor 1, and where did we go? You guys are killing me.
Major 1, major 5.
Yeah, good. So we started in major and we went to the 5. So major 1 to regular old dominant. Okay, so that was a good way to get you started, kind of refresh your memory of what this is like. The second one, which had a really cool pivot that we'll talk about on Tuesday. Did we start in major or minor?
Major.
Major. Did we end in major or minor?
Major.
Also major. Okay, so was that a 1 to 5 modulation like the first one, or was it a 1 to 3 modulation? Some of you are like vigorously shaking your heads. No. So that was a 1 to 3 modulation. Major 1 to major 3. And we'll talk about how we got there on Tuesday. Number 3, did we start in major or minor?
Minor.
Minor, yeah. So you've sort of figured out the answer to the modulation scheme just by being sure that you started in minor. We went from minor 1 to major 3. Now, that modulation is very, very slippery because you're moving to the relative major, which means that you share all the notes. As long as you discount the leading tone in minor, you share everybody. So that modulation can be really, really slippery because of all of the shared pitches. Okay, number 4. Did we start in major or minor?
Major.
Major, yeah. Did we end in major or minor? Minor, yeah. So that was our major 1 to minor 3 modulation. And that one was constructed similarly to the Coleridge-Taylor in its pivot chord. So it had a nice diatonic pivot chord. Now let's talk about the last one. Which, did we start in major or minor for the last one?
Major.
Major, good. Did we go to major or minor? Minor. So we went 1 to 3 again. Major 1 to minor 3. But we got there via this like kind of bananas modulation topic. So that one we will revisit on Tuesday too, because it's a really, really cool modulation. It happens in the Brahms Requiem. That particular modulation scheme and pivot chord is really, really neat. But it's an interesting juxtaposition to progression 4 that went 1 to minor 3 in a relatively smooth way. This one, we went to the same place. We still went 1 to minor 3, but we got there through this wild kind of chromatic whirlwind. So, things to think about, because I'm going to let you go in a minute or two. So if this was challenging for you, those recordings are up there forever. So feel free to hop back in that folder and practice things like getting the bass line down. That'll be really helpful. And even trying to work out where the pivot chord might be. So if you're thinking about eventually putting Roman numerals to that, which I would never ask you to do on a quiz, but I will ask you to do in class. If you're thinking about doing that, your pivot chord is usually, if you remember from theory 2, your pivot chord is 1 prior to the chord that sounds chromatic. So if you remember when we were modulating to the 5 in theory 2, we always said find the 5 of 5, so find the sharp 4 chord, and then back up 1, and that's your pivot chord. So kind of use that too as you're listening. That first chord that sounds obviously chromatic, back up 1. And that's usually your best candidate for a pivot chord. So you're welcome to play around with that between now and Tuesday. Some of you have already submitted stuff on Google Classroom. I will grade that by the end of the day tomorrow. So if you already submitted things, you'll be getting grades back in the next day or so. Other than that, I kept you guys a little bit longer, but if you want to stay and practice or have questions, feel free to hang out. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.